And it was so difficult for people to tell the difference between a human written answer and a ChatGPT written answer.
We will be delving into one of the critical pillars of India AI Mission, which is Indigenous AI Innovation.
Think about LLMs like the brains, SLMs like the specialized tools, and LMMs, which are like the senses. You can see, hear, read together. With AI, you can leapfrog everything. There is no cultural barrier, there's no language barrier, and it can be scaled up at almost zero cost.
Everyone will truly feel empowered. And this is what our podcast also aims for. If the institutions are not inclusive, then a nation is doomed to fail.
In AI, the future belongs to those who build, not just consume.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of AI Square, where arguments and inquiry meet artificial intelligence. This is a team of two people, Manish Maheshwari and Bhumika Nebhnani. And this duo met at the Harvard Project for Asian and International Relations, from where this entire conversation started. I'm extremely grateful to have you here, Manish, and for you to be giving an impetus to this conversation. So I'll just quickly start with setting up the context of this episode. In this episode, we will be delving into one of the critical pillars of India AI Mission, which is Indigenous AI Innovation. And we will be talking about this from a global perspective. So we will talk about indigenous nets at large and then talk about India-specific indigenous innovation in particular. To start with the very first question, Manish, and zooming out, how do you see the evolution of AI and what has started this conversation on building indigenous models now?
First of all, Bhumika, thank you for having me on this podcast. To your question about evolution of AI, most people have started talking about AI since ChatGPT.
Yes.
But the reality is, AI didn't start with ChatGPT. ChatGPT that represents generative AI is the latest leap. But
Right.
AI has been there for like decades. When I was heading to India,
Yeah.
we used to have AI-powered content moderation, spam detection, and
Right.
also personalized feed based on understanding many of the data points. And AI was the decision support for us. It helped humans and the agents detect harmful content faster. So AI was there before ChatGPT as well. And in industries like finance, AI has been used for like decades in areas such as credit scoring and fraud detection.
Right.
And some of them are rule-based, but some of them are also beyond rule-based. Like they infer when someone should be given credit or when a fraud is expected based on historical data and trends. But what did happen is that many of these tools were not generative in the sense that they were not coming out with new content or new things, and they were not generative of the new content types. And that is a big leap that happened in 2022 with the introduction of ChatGPT. But if I go even back, think about it, how did AI even evolve? So the real shift in AI came with the rise of the deep learning post 2012, where the ImageNet breakthrough happened, where AI was able to say, okay, look at a picture of this, think about this like a cat and dog, and it was able to tell you which picture belongs to whom, and completely without a rule-based system. It was doing it based on the learning and the training it was given. And then in 2017 came the transformation architecture, which enabled the foundational models like ChatGPT to take shape much later in 2022.
Understood.
And I think the reason why people remember AI from 2022 is because it was for the first time that it was put in a chat interface. And when people started typing questions, it started giving back answers like a real human being. It was like so difficult for people to tell the difference between a human written answer and a GPT written or chat GPT written answer. And that's when it caught the public imagination. So the evolution has been like going on for like decades on this one.
Great. I think that really puts the entire conversation into an evolutionary perspective. Talking about the second question, what do you think are we trying to make? So when we talk about indigenous AI innovation, India AI Mission talks about building foundational models. It talks about building large language models, large multimodal models, and also small language models. So for a non-technical person like me who doesn't come from a technology background, how will you explain this to a lay person? And I think it was the same question that I asked you at the conference as well. And I remember you gave a very simple answer for everyone to understand. So I want that to be shared with the larger audience. Over to you.
Just to be clear, your question is like, how is LLM versus small language model versus large multimodal model? How are they different? Is that the question?
Yes. And also, what is foundational about foundational models?
Yeah, so let's start with foundational or the LLM models. They are trained on vast amount of data, right? So they are like the brains on which you can have specialized tools. So LLMs are the brains. Small language models are like the specialized tools, and they are called language models because they are trained on text, and their input output interface is more language or textual input output interface. That's why they are called language models. An example of LLM would be ChatGPT is an LLM, Servam AI in the context of India is an LLM. And their use cases are basically text related tasks, for example, chat, translation, Q&A. And in the case of large language models, they have access to billions of data points and parameters. So they are good foundationally, like they have the foundation of almost everything. So they can know about almost every aspect of human knowledge or any kind of content that is out there in the internet. Now, when you compare that, the key difference between LLM and SLM is that SLM is domain specific AI. So it can be domain specific in the area of, say, education or healthcare because it is trained on very domain specific information.
Got
It
it.
uses, it has a it is based on the learning of fewer data, but more specialized data. It has fewer parameters, and it can be a language model. It is text based, and if it is not text based, then we'll talk about the model, which is an example where the inputs and the outputs can be things beyond text. For example, it can be image, it can be video, it can be voice, and when you have those, then those kind of models are called multimodal models because the multimodal here is that it's beyond text to voice and video.
Right.
Now, an example of multimodal would be Gemini. Gemini is multimodal. DeepSeek is multimodal. I think that's how I would compare and contrast. So, in a very simplistic layman's language, and particularly given that we are focusing on non-technical audience in this podcast, think about LLMs like the brains, SLMs like the specialized tools, and LMMs, which are the multimodal models like the senses. You can see, hear, read together. And even more simplistically, to bring home the difference between LLM and SLM, a very good analogy here would be if you think about the internet, the whole infrastructure of the internet is like the foundation. And when you think about specific apps, like for example, apps like a Twitter as an app or a Spotify as an app, those are the specific use cases, which are what SLMs would be in the AI world.
Understood. Thank you for that perspective and a simpler analogy for us to understand this. The next question is about what is indigenous within an indigenous AI model. So, there are various components that go into making an AI model. And what do you think makes a model truly indigenous?
Yeah, so good question. I think most people, when they say indigenous, they think about how is it solving for a local language.
Yeah.
So indigenous AI is way more than and way beyond just a language change because that's an easy one and you can do that through translation. But a true indigenous model AI, true indigenous AI includes, first of all, indigenous data sets.
Right.
When I said indigenous data sets, that includes, which means local data set, which are culturally relevant. The second component of indigenous AI is indigenous talent. So Indian researchers and Indian startups building it to solve for the local need. And then the third component of indigenous AI would be indigenous infrastructure, which would mean chips and compute power owned and controlled locally so that there is no dependence on another country or another player. And final and also very important component of indigenous AI is the indigenous governance and values, which would mean privacy, inclusion, ethics aligned to the Indian context, Indian social norms, Indian democracy. So language is just one piece. Without control over other layers, we remain still dependent. That's one. And I think one important question is also why indigenous has become so important now. So it's become important now because we all have come to realize that AI is going to be a game changing thing. It is going to be very powerful in many ways and will shape the future of the evolution or technological evolution for sure. And therefore, there is this whole geopolitical need to be in control of that and
Right.
shape it in a way that solves our need and also allows us to benefit from it. And countries are realizing it, and you cannot always depend on foreign AI for various reasons. It could be because of national security, it could be because you want to preserve your cultural identity. And it could
Yes.
also be because of you want to maintain economic competitiveness. And
Right.
the DeepSeek, which came out of China, has been a wake up call, particularly to a country like India, because what DeepSeek showed is that they could take a foundational model, but then they could train it on Chinese data and they could optimize it for local need and they could solve them much better at a much lower cost. It's an open source, but it is built with a strategic intent to meet a specific need. And I think in my mind, I'm happy to see that India has responded quite well. And it has started by investing in indigenous AI, such as Sarvam AI. I also hear about Socket AI, which allows now India, if it progresses well, to have control over data models as well as the values.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that insight into why indigenous is important and what are the true components of what makes the model indigenous. I would love to hear your experience at Harvard where you created an award-winning Megha model and how do you connect it with indigenousness? So, if you could talk about that and how did it solve for Indian problems per se?
Yeah, no, great. Would love to share more about that. So we were part of a team which was participating in AI for Good Hackathon. And one of the problem we were aware of that in India, there's a lot of government-run programs and schemes to help the poor and the people who are at the edges of the society. The problem there is that even if there is an intent and there are resources, the right kind of information is not available to the right people. As a result, they remain deprived and their condition never
Absolutely.
improves. And we thought that AI could play a role in fixing that. So what we did was using AI, we built a model, a voice-based model, where we fed all the information relevant to the state of Meghalaya in India about all the government schemes and program. And it was all voice based. So anyone across the state could call a number and tell about their situation, what are they looking for, and it would give them information about which government program is relevant to them, what kind of
Got
benefits they are eligible for, where they should go and apply, and how do they benefit from it. And
right.
that was something game changing because for two reasons. One is that it made it super simple. You don't have to read any form, you don't have to go to any website. You just
Hmm.
pick up the phone and talk as if you'll talk to a friend. And second is it was real time, on demand in their local language. So it took the entire complexity away from the entire system. And that is why it was so eye opening for everyone that, with AI, you can leapfrog everything. There is no
Right.
cultural barrier, there's no language barrier, there is no modality barrier. It need
Hmm.
not be a text based, it can be voice based as well. And it can be available 24 by 7 and it can be scaled up at almost zero cost. So that was
Right.
the eye-opening thing, which is why it won the first prize at the Harvard's AI for Good hackathon. And since then, the scope has increased to also include many other things, and it is now called AI Savera. Also, one thing I want to bring home is the whole closed versus open source debate, right? Open source, DeepSeek is open source model, while Sarvam, which is the India one, is a closed source model. And both have different advantages and disadvantages, right? Open source drives transparency. It also enables one to have community innovation and developer involvement because then you can really make sure that a lot of developers build on it and it becomes
Right.
the standard. On the other hand, closed source model is important also for different reasons. One is, of course, about it has indigenous data sets, and people may argue that it is important for security. So what is important here is to look for a balance, right? When do you go for open source versus closed source? And that balance is a key, right? For example, in the case of Mega AI, the data sets which are coming were very proprietary. So of course, we had to build a model which was based on that, and that information was never posted publicly. But then the kind of tools we used were sourced openly, right? We were using a lot of open source tools, but they were working on a indigenous or a local data set. And we
Got
had to
it.
work out quite a few things there. And everyone has to think through the implications of how do you do this. And I think that's an interesting consideration, and we'll have to see how things evolve as we go
Right.
deeper into this discussion.
Got it. I think we will be discussing more on data sets and the debates around open source and closed source when we discuss the specific pillars of India AI mission relevant to this debate. But thank you so much for putting this into perspective, especially in terms of AI for good and how building indigenous models like Megha will be culturally relevant for India and solve for indigenous problems. My final question to you will be around three top challenges that you see are prevalent in indigenous AI innovation And what do you suggest as solutions for them?
I think good question. I think the debate is like there's a lot of debate about this, and I think you asked a point blank question. So if I were to say three big the challenges, one is of course infrastructure or compute dependency. Almost everyone is dependent on NVIDIA chips because the amount of compute that is needed, and I think India will have to do something about it in the sense that they have to build that infrastructure and compute capacity to reduce their dependence. And until that happens, we cannot be truly indigenous. Second is the talent pipeline. The amount of investment we make in R&D and also on AI education research is quite low. And I think we have to increase that allocation. The third is around inclusivity and ethics, which are relevant to India as well, because India is a very diverse and a diverse country, not just in terms of the problem sets and in terms of the content type, but also in terms of the socio-economic diversity in terms of the economic differences, right? And what we don't want is AI to disproportionately benefit the rich and the powerful and make them more knowledgeable. But we want to
Right,
ensure that the benefits of AI is quite inclusive and it is spread far and wide. And that is where investing in the right kind of governance and value system in terms of
right.
how AI is used and how AI benefits flow and trickle down to everyone is going to be a challenge as well as a big opportunity for India, just as we showed in Mega AI, how you can bring the benefit to the last mile, and that's
Right.
when the real innovation happens. And I think at a government level a lot of, and at a policy level, a lot of those things have to be looked into, while the private enterprise will work in areas which are highly lucrative. At a policy level we also have to ensure that the benefits are spread far and wide and help the society and the country.
Thank you for sharing those challenges according to you as well as the way forward. I think that brings and very well connects to the final ritual that we are supposed to do at the end of each of our episodes. This is what I call the AI square marker. So, this brings us back to the broader perspective of initiating this debate, argument and inquiry on artificial intelligence, right? AI square marker aims to bring home one value, one takeaway, or one philosophy that technical developers can keep in mind and also policy people can keep in mind while going forward in this indigenous AI journey. So I want to throw light on this work by Ace Moglu and Robinson, which is Why Nations Fail. And this also won the Nobel Economic Prize last year. So they bring home a very pertinent point. According to them, if everything else is in place, despite of that, if the institutions are not inclusive, then a nation is doomed to fail. What we need going ahead is that a lot of more people are involved in conversations around AI. And therefore, by debating and discussing, will we be able to achieve the true sense of democracy which prevails in India. Each voice will therefore matter in shaping the debates and discussions around AI, and everyone will truly feel empowered. And this is what our podcast also aims for. Thank you so much, Manish. I think it was a very crisp and to the point discussion on indigenous AI innovation, where we also talked about the larger context of the evolution of AI.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Bhumika. I think some great thoughts you are leaving this episode with. And I just want to close by saying that in AI, the future belongs to those who build, not just consume. So India's indigenous AI is how we can ensure technology speaks our language, reflects our values, and
Right.
serves our people. So good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
All
And I'll
right.
log
See
off
you
with
in the
this.
next episode.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.